Hi BookTube and welcome to a new video. This is a tag video. This was originated by Sean the Book Maniac. It's the second in his series of the Alphabet Soup book tag. The letter today is N. And question one is, N is for Novella, the last good one you read. Well, Sean in his original video defined Novella as anything under 200 pages, which seems rather a lot to me. I know as an author that you generally regard anything from about 17,000 to 40,000 words as a novella. But, you know, it's impossible for me to tell, you know, in a Microsoft Word document, it tells you how many words. Unfortunately, in a novel like this, it doesn't. So, slightly arbitrary, I suppose, but I would imagine a novella to be anything sort of less than 100 pages. But, you know, I'm prepared to be disproved on that. Having said that, the book I've chosen is 101 pages, and that is Gabriele Josipovici, The Cemetery at Barnes, which was on the long list for, I think, the Republic of Consciousness Prize and the Goldsmiths Prize shortlist. I enjoyed this. It's about a man and his two wives. The first one has died in sort of mysterious circumstances. And so there's sort of three timelines that sort of intercut with each other. The first one is with his first wife, the second is with his second wife, and then there's a third one. And his character changes between the two. He's sort of not an unreliable narrator, but it's written in such a way by the author. It's like a sort of a postmodern novel on the sort of the impossibility of tying down a human mind or a human psyche into one, you know, thing with, you know, firm dimensions. And it's a good read and it's an interesting book. Question two, N is for Neighbour, a work of fiction focused on, or at least largely concerned with neighbours. Well, I struggled to find something that fit this. One is, I did come up with, which I unfortunately no longer have, it succumbed to my mould outburst earlier this year. And that is B.S. Johnson's House Mother Normal, which is set in a residential care home for old people and is sort of Rashomon-like, has 8 different viewpoints on a set of events on one night, mostly from the viewpoints of the residents, but also from the house mother, the person in charge of looking after them. And a lot of these residents have different levels of Alzheimer's, so that, you know, what they're able to recall and express is quite limited. It's a very good book, and I'm assuming they're neighbours because they'll have their separate rooms within this residential home. The other one I have is Stefan Zweig, Stefan Zweig's Confusion, which I just read and just reviewed, where a student moves into the house as where his professor and the professor's wife live, so they are neighbours and their lives very much intertwined. 3, N is for Name, a writer you'd recommend whose first and or last name starts with an N. Well, apart from recommending myself, Mark Nash, you should all go read all of my books. I'm going to talk about Jeff Noon. So it's slightly difficult to recommend Jeff Noon because there's 2 Jeff Noon. When I say 2, I don't mean 2 different writers. There are 2 styles of books from Jeff Noon, and actually this year, it was this year. This year he actually increased it to 3. So the most common Jeff Noon oeuvre is sort of cyberpunk, urban fantasy books, of which Vert and Pollen and things like that. But Jeff Noon also, his second stream is sort of quite experimental fiction, which, you know, is the stuff that I really like. So it's this Cobra Lingus, another book called Mapalujo. So I'm just going to quickly show you Cobra Lingus, what it looks like. So as you can see, lots of visual stuff. And I talk extensively about this book on the Paper Trail podcast, which I will post a link to, so I don't have to talk about it now. But this year there was a third output from Jeff Noon, where he's written his first fairly straight crime thriller. This is called Slow Motion Ghosts. And it was really good, because Jeff Noon worked in a record shop like I did, and is very taken with music. One of his sort of urban books is called Needle in the Groove, and is all about it's about a sound, a particular sound. This is about a sort of a glam rock star, sort of Mark Bolan sort of spliced with David Bowie, who was found dead in his car, and 20 years on it's sort of unravelling the story of that and his devoted fan base. It's really good, but it is very straightforward crime thriller. 4, N is for Nuptials, a work of fiction that didn't suck about a wedding. I don't have one. The closest I can come to, and I don't have it here, it's in my shed, is Andrew Sean Greer's book Less, where the main character is a gay man whose previous love is about to get married, have a gay marriage, and this character does anything to avoid it. So he sets up a sort of rather lame-assed literary tour, because he is a writer, although one whose sort of reputation is somewhat in decline. That takes him all over the world to get away from this wedding. So I'm afraid that was the best I could do. 5, N is for Not Aging Well, a book you liked less than when you read. I don't really have one for this, because by the time I finished... First of all, I don't bail on books. So by the time I finished a book, I'm fairly sort of well set in my opinions of it. And because I don't go back and reread books terribly often, I don't have that opportunity to go back and read it and say, oh, actually, I have a completely different view of this. So, good or bad. So I honestly don't really have an answer for that. 6, N is for a book with a title with lots of N's. Well, I'm not sure whether you're going to allow this, Sean. So, Meander, Spiral, Explode, Design and Pattern in Narrative. Now, if you're allowed to count design and pattern in narrative, then this is the book, because we've got one in Meander, and then one in Design 2, one in And 3, one in Pattern 4, one in Narrative 5. But I suspect that might be disqualified. So I've gone for a couple of fiction books. Andrew Crumey's The Great Chain of Unbeing, which has 3. So we've got N in Chain and 2 in Unbeing. Or one of Sean's favourite books himself, and a novella, actually. And this is less than 100 pages. Yeah, this is 85. A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. So 1 in month, 1 in inn, and 1 in country. So 3, like the Andrew Crumey. 7. N is for Not Sure. A book you keep changing your mind about whether you want to read or not. Well, I'm committed to reading this because I've got at least 2 other people want to do, in fact 3 I think now, people want to do a buddy read, but I keep sort of being exactly as that prompt describes, unsure and coming back to it. Fernando Pessoa, The Book of Disquiet. And the reason I'm unsure about this is, let's see if it says. Well, basically it's a fragmentary book, and I'm a little tired of fragmentary novels, to be honest. And it's a real chunker. It's getting up to 500 pages of fragmentation. I'm not sure I can take that, but I'm committed to it. And I've said to my fellow buddies, I said, we have to give it at least 100 pages. So I'm committed to reading at least 100 pages. And I might even, if I don't like it, I might even bail. First time in ages. 8. What's happened to my enumeration today? 8. N is for Nitpick. Some small literary, writing or book-related thing that drives you around the bend. Deckled edges. I can't turn the pages. 9. N is for Next to Nothing. A book you read as an adult you can barely remember a blessed thing about. Well, there's a fair few of those, such as my memory. Now, the first is by my favourite writer, Notable American Women by Ben Marcus. I can't remember a thing about this, which is a bit worrying. All I remember about it is I could see the seeds of his far greater works were laid down in here. This is one of his earlier books, but not the first. And that's all I remember. I couldn't tell you a thing about the plot or anything. And the other one I'm going to talk about is Matthew Sharp, You Were Wrong. I first read a collection of his short stories, really liked them, so I thought I'll go for a novel of his, and this is the one. And I remember I quite liked it, but I can't remember anything about it, so I'm actually going to reacquaint myself with what this is about by reading the blurb. It is 2008 in the suburban town of Seacrest, Long Island. 26-year-old high school math teacher Carl Floor has no parents, no friends, few prospects, is a dim bowl, and lives at home with Larchmont Jones, the aggressively loquacious widower of Carl's mother. One fine afternoon, Carl returns to his house after work to discover a beautiful stranger in the upstairs hallway. Oh, it could have been one for Neighbours if only I'd remembered what this book was. She is Sylvia Vetch and claims to be robbing him. She also asks for his protection, but won't quite say from what or whom, and draws him into trouble she won't elucidate. No Sherlock Holmes, Cole still slowly begins to see and engage the complex forces that have been shaping his life. His parentage and inheritance, morality and law, the racial and economic geography of present-day New York City and the world at large. Darkly funny and original, You Were Wrong is a surreal detective story told with heart, wit and a singular voice. Well, you know, that sounds brilliant. I can't remember a bloody thing about it. I'm going to have to go back and reread this. 10. Ennis for New Zealand. A book or a writer you'd like to read from there. Find out about one if need be. It will be fun. Well, I took Sean's advice and I did go online trying to find a New Zealand writer that would appeal to me, and I couldn't find one. So I've gone a slightly different route. I've gone Ennis for Nicaragua, and I found a book that I am interested in reading. It's called Adios Muchachos, una memoria de la Revolución Sandinista. So something like Goodbye Friends, a memory of the Sandinista Revolution by Sergio Ramirez. It is in English. I don't know quite why I copied and pasted the Spanish title, but there you go. So Ennis for Nicaragua, and I'd like to read that book by Sergio Ramirez. Nicaragua is one of those countries that I got obsessed with during the time of the Sandinista, not only because of the Clash triple album of the same name, but it's all the sort of anti-Reagan politics of the time, and that's before Oliver North turned up. And I did a sponsored hair shave for Nicaragua when I was at university. N is for Nodding Off, a mind-numbingly boring book. The Stubborn Archivist by Yara Rodriguez Fowler, an Anglo-Brazilian author. Oh God, this was dreadful. I read it this year. This is her debut novel, came out this year, I think. She is an archivist of her own life, and unfortunately she's stubborn, so that produced this book, because nothing happens. It's a completely uninteresting life, you know, split between South London and Brazil. Should be exotic at least, and it just isn't. It's just boring. Oh, and I'm glad to say that Eric Carl Anderson also felt a little disappointed by this book. So, you know, I must be onto the right track with that. 12. And as for next, the next book you're going to read, this is Glitch by Lee Rourke, who is his third book, and it's published by Dead Ink, who are my publishers. Lee very kindly hosted the discussion for my launch of my own book, and I'll post a link to that, because we talked for 45 minutes on all things sort of literary out there, particularly things like disruptive lit and feminism in lit, and whether men can have the right to write about feminism. So looking forward to that. And 13, and as for now it's your turn, tag a bevy of booktubers. Well, I would, Sean, but you seem to have tagged every single booktuber that I follow. So like Sean says, please go ahead, feel free to do this. It's a really good tag. And thanks, Sean. I'm looking forward to the next letter. Till next time.